Hi everyone, I do hope you are well and are staying safe. Within this episode we're going to be looking at the rivers and the roads section. So we will essentially create a river within our terrain here as well as a road. In the next few episodes we're going to be essentially finishing the terrain down here. So essentially we're going to add a load more cottage and hut assets, add some roads, some like street lamps. So we're going to essentially build this out into like a fantasy little village. So that will be completed within the next couple or so episodes. And then after that, we're going to be moving on to like the game mechanics. So like game menus, sound, getting our player to interact with other objects and players. So essentially, yeah. So that's like the plan of the next few episodes. And so, as I said before, we're going to be looking at how we can add rivers and roads to our terrain here. So let's just get started with it. So the first thing we want to do is we just want to create a new entity. So if we just right click here, create entity, we can see that a new entity here appears in the entity outliner. So what we can do is if we click on it, we can go and give it a new name. So I'm going to start off with the road one first. So if we enter road just as a name, you can name this whatever you want as it doesn't really matter. But then what we're going to do is if we go ahead and click on add component and we scroll down, we see at the bottom under the terrain section here, we have two options, a river and a road. We're going to click on the road one. So when you click on it, we get this road properties drop-down menu appear with all the options below. But you'll notice that here it says it needs to add some required components. That is fine, you can go ahead and do this. If you click it, and then you just click on the spline, it will automatically add this. So what you'll see here is now a spline has been added to our terrain here. So if we zoom in, you can see that a road texture has actually been applied to the terrain. And as well as this, it is also blended in very nicely with all the bobbles and hills within our terrain. So it actually looks very realistic. So how do we go ahead and expand this road? Well, that's quite easy. So to expand this road to make it a bit longer, what we can do is if we select the move tool up here, then we click on, let's say, the third part of the spline, and we bring out the road here like this. You can see that it's actually expanding the road texture. So let's say let's say we want to curve it slightly. So let's say we want to go towards this section here, and then extend it a bit more. You can see that it actually curves. And so let's say we were to go the other direction. If we went and click on the 0 part of the spline, and we bring it backwards. And then we also, let's say we wanted to curve that way, let's say towards the front door of the house. You can see that the road's like texture is actually curving towards where we position each of these. So each point on the spline will cause the road texture to go towards it. So we can like separate these bits out. So we could go, for example, like that, move it that way, and then move that bit, move this part of the spline that way. And you can see we get a very like zigzagged sort of road, which doesn't look that good. So we can, so to fix this, we could just add more spline objects, or we could just make sure that the roads aren't this twisted. However, let's say we do want the roads to be as this twisted. What we can do is just add more spline objects to make it look a bit more realistic. For example, that's got a slight bend to it, and it does look good. But to add more like dots here, our points, what we're going to do is if you hold control, you can see that a little plus appears next to the cursor. So let's say we want to put another point here. If we click it, you can see another spline object has appeared here, and our original 3 point here has changed to 4. So this allows us to adjust where the road positions to. So that means if we hold the control again, we could go like that, and it just makes it a bit more accurate for us to make our road look realistic. So if we go into the game view of this and we turn around, you can see that it actually looks really good because it has blended in with the terrain really nicely. However, this point here, as you can see here, it's not looking that good. However, we can easily just fix that with just adjusting it, the spline object here, just to make it look a bit nicer, for example, something like that. So the point is, so the turn isn't too harsh. So essentially, that's how we use the road texture and the road part of the component. So we're going to be using this road texture in the next episode of this RPG series for when we create our village. So we'll have like the road connecting up some of the houses and potentially a road coming out of the village itself, like maybe potentially over a mountain, for example. That could be a potential idea we could do. But yeah, so essentially that's how the road works, and that's what we're going to be using for our village, which we'll be doing in the next episode. So let's move on to the river. So I'm just going to leave that road there because, yeah, I'm going to create a new entity, and instead of naming this one road, we can give it a name of river. And the same thing again is what we can do if we go add components, we scroll down, and then we can see we've got under the terrain section, we've got a river one. If we click that, you'll see that we get loads of the same thing again. We've got the drop down with loads of settings we can edit. And then we can go ahead and click on the add required component button. And then we want to do the spline thing again. So that's the same thing we did for the road. And if we click it, the same thing applies. You could see here that it's added some water and it looks like a river. So yeah, that's how that works. I just realized that I didn't actually talk about the properties of the road section here. So essentially, I'll quickly go over that now. So essentially, the global width, that's quite self-explanatory. That's how wide you want your road to be. These are the elements. So these are like the spline points. The rendering, that's just to do with like how it looks and all of that. The road material, so you can set your own road material if you don't like the default one that comes with it. You can get it so it ignores terrain holes. So that's like if there's big dips in there, we don't want to keep that ticked because that's especially with ours because we've got loads of those. Terrain editing, and so that's just the width of the that's just to do when you place the road, how it affects the rest of the terrain. And then the vegetation editing is where the road will erode or remove any vegetation that it comes across. So let's just say for the point of explaining this, we've got a tree just past this 5 point here, so just here, and we wanted to expand this 5 point forward like this. It would essentially remove that tree because the road is going through it, if you see what I mean. Essentially, that's what the vegetation editing thing does. Okay, so let's head back to the river bit now. So if we go back over here, it's very similar to the how the road works. So we essentially have our points on the spline, and we can add more by clicking the control button. But let's say we also expand it out like we did with the road. If we expand it, let's say that way, and we want to expand 0.0 that way. Oops, sorry. If we click on that, there we go, and we can expand it that way. What you're going to notice is when we go into the game view, is that if we go over here, let's just move the character closer so that makes it a bit easier for us. We don't have to walk over. Let's grab it on the X and just head over here. So if we go into you'll see here that the our water is going beneath beneath the terrain. That is because this section of the terrain just here is higher than the water is originally placed, and physics, as in water can't go up a hill. That's why it stays. That's why it goes below like that. That's why. However, let's say for example we were to create a trench. Let's just say running from this side of the mountain over here, down here, and it's like a trench line. So like how with a riverbed, how it goes like under, you know what I mean, like you've got the banks either side, and we were to create like a dip down there. We could place our river bit here inside of this trench, and we could so if we go into the settings of the river, we can increase the depth, so like how deep down it goes and all of that, and we can adjust the global width to the size of that trench, so it actually looks like a river is flowing through this trench down the mountains. But the same like physics applies. You can't make the river go uphill because of gravity. So a quick overview of the settings. The global width is how wide your river is. The pre-vertex is the spline, points on the spline. Again, the same thing applies for the road. If you want to add it, you add more points to the spline. You click Control and Add. The depth is how deep like water is. The river material is that you could check is set to default the river, but you could change it the texture to make it look like what you want it to look like. The underwater fog, so you can make it look like misty below the surface. So via terrain editing, this is what I was talking about with the carving of Riverbed. It will essentially create a riverbed for where the river can flow through, and if there's like a hill on the terrain, it will essentially go through that. And the same with vegetation editing, it will remove like trees and vegetation if the river crosses that bit. But so yeah, so essentially if you wanted to make the riverbed, you could potentially do it like that. So that's how you would go ahead and do it, as in it would remove like these hills here so the river could actually flow through it. So yeah, that's the road and the river, and that's the end of this video. In the next video, we're going to be creating this village. So we're going to be adding loads more assets, so cottages and huts and lampposts, to make a nice village in this area we've got just here. We're going to be using the river and the road tools as well to help create this. And so essentially, yeah, that will be the for the next episode. But if you've enjoyed this episode, please do give it a thumbs up if it helps you. Do consider subscribing. Oh, and by the way, we've got a Discord server, so do consider joining that if you'd like to. And thank you, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.